Got to thank Ken Block for coming to ShakeDown. Thank you. So ShakeDown, as maybe you know or don't know, is more about the racing. So I'd like to focus a little bit of our conversation, no offense to the Gymkhana 5 videos and such, on the motorsport, the racing, your rallying, as well as maybe the motorsport marketing side of it. Cool?
No problem.
You started by growing up in Long Beach. Did you go to the Long Beach Grand Prix, and was that an inspiration?
I went to it once as a kid, but my inspiration for motorsports, although I had sort of lots of influences around my family and American motorsports, but my influence on motorsport always came from Formula One and rally, but especially the World Rally Championship.
Now, you had mentioned in another interview that you kind of did it backwards, built the business, then went racing, but you earned your own privilege because you created the platform, and that's what got you into rally?
Yeah, you know, the funny thing is, as a kid, like, I always dreamt of being a professional skateboarder or snowboarder, and I just was never talented enough, and I realized that early on. But I did race, you know, like amateur motocross up until I was around 18, and I got to like an intermediate level. And I just absolutely loved actually being an athlete and doing that stuff and pushing myself. But I knew that I just was not good enough to be a pro, so I always, you know, knew that I was going to have to find a business angle somehow to stay in those industries, because I absolutely love the industries. And that's how I ended up starting some businesses with my business partner, Damon Way, that we did Drawers Clothing and 8 Ball and Dub, and eventually ended up doing DC Shoes.
I tried to wear DC Orange. So you are, in my mind, the guy that understands motorsport marketing. But the racing is an integral part of what you're doing. Talk to me a little bit about that. Connect the dots.
Yeah, well, what I did for DC all those years was mainly marketing. So I hired the athletes, I built the ads, I directed a lot of the videos, and I mean that in a creative way. We had great people that worked underneath me, but I was mainly the creative director that drove everything. And my title eventually was Chief Brand Officer, because I kind of oversaw, you know, how the brand looked and felt and the design of it. So I was very lucky to learn all that and have that experience. I basically taught myself too. I didn't go to school for this. I actually went to school for architecture, believe it or not. But I loved 3D design. I love architecture design, and I'm actually gotten fairly good at industrial design. So when I got into motorsports, I did it because that's what I just absolutely love to do. I grew up loving rally. I drove that way when I got my own hands and my own keys. You know, I was even arrested when I was 17 for jumping a car.
How many tickets into that did you decide to go racing, right?
Yeah. So when I got in and started actually racing rally, I did it just purely as a passion. But as things went along, like, it was fun to take some of the marketing skills and the things that I knew how to do and mix that in to help promote. And one of the main reasons for that is, and a lot of people don't realize this, is like the videos that we started doing with DC to expose what Travis Pastrana and I were doing on the team that we were on, was because we didn't actually have a TV deal for the championship that we were racing in. So one of the main ways that we got exposure for what we were doing, you know, to make sponsors happy and get more sponsors, was to actually start doing some of this video stuff and put it on the internet. How
many tens of millions of views does the Gymkhana series have now? Why do I want to say 800 million?
No. I think it's over 160 million now. Yeah, which is just ridiculous. Like that, it's hard to put that in perspective, because there's a lot of commercials out there in the world, but not much that have gotten anywhere near that as far as viral views on the internet.
Yeah, well, we're working on a promotion with another motorsport entity, and they had their thing on TV.
Yeah.
At 3 a.m. in the morning, and somehow they figured out the internet works better. So thank you for helping on that one, man. Sold that. Can we talk a little about the racing?
Yeah.
How do you pick the events you pick? I mean, your schedule is kind of like an eclectic collection of WRC and Canada and Rally America and GRC.
Yeah, well, some of that's picked by my sponsors. Like,
okay,
they want me doing certain things to get them exposure. I like everything that has to do with racing a four-wheel drive rally type car. So I'm a rally driver at heart. Like, I love stage rally.
Okay.
But, you know, going off and doing, you know, rallycross or Gymkhana, you know, to me are just fun ways to go out and use that same car, but in a different way. So for this year, global rallycross was a big priority with my sponsors, so I committed to that championship for the whole season. Then we worked in, the Rally America events, Canada events, World Rally Championship, everything to kind of work around that schedule. So I would actually like to do more, but there's only so much time and budget to fit into a year.
Put me in your helmet or in your head. I don't mean that to sound scary, but is your mindset approach when you're doing a Gymkhana video different from when you're racing, or the same, or talk to me about that?
Yeah, there's a bit of a backstory to that. Okay. The funny thing is, growing up as a kid, skateboarding, snowboarding, riding a dirt bike, you generally do it for fun. Competition is such a small part of it. And even when I raced motocross, just as an amateur rider, like it was maybe 10% of the time that I spent on a dirt bike. But when you get into car racing, it's the opposite. Your fun is actually when the clock is running typically, and there's all that pressure. But I love just getting into the car and doing things because I enjoy doing it. These cars are so amazing to go out and drive that sometimes it's nice just to be able to get in the car and not worry about the clock. So a lot of times I really enjoy going out and doing testing, tire testing for rally, for Gymkhana, or rallycross. It's fun just to go out and enjoy the car. And that's kind of where the source of like the Gymkhana thing came from. I wanted to do more simple grassroots driving of the car just to get more seat time, learn especially to slide the four-wheel drive car around on tarmac, because we don't have really tarmac rallies in the National Rally Championship here. So all that kind of led me towards the Gymkhana series that was going on in Southern California. So mainly, once again, back to being able to spend time in the car and enjoy it, have fun with the car, as opposed to only being worried about the time. Yeah.
So I'm not going to pretend to understand the technicalities of how you drive, but maybe educate us all a little bit. In a race car, if the car is really working, you feel like you're on the tire, and it's kind of like balancing it. When you're running this car and doing the maneuvers you do, is it like that, or is it kind of hunkered down onto the ground, or what do you feel to get the car to move?
Everything that I do actually comes from skills I learned for rally. Right. And when I developed the setup of the Gymkhana car, I wanted the Gymkhana car to feel like it does when I'm racing on gravel. And the gravel setup for racing rally is quite a soft setup, because you want the car to weight transfer and to get grip, really lean on the tires on the dirt and find that grip and get around the corner. But with typically a tarmac, you're doing the opposite. You're looking for the grip. You're very stiff. You have a little bit of movement in the car, a little bit of weight transfer, but you're always trying to get grip, not to slide. So when I started doing the Gymkhana stuff, I basically set the car up very loose so that you could weight transfer and get the car to slide in a very consistent manner. So it's quite strange. Like the guys that I was working with didn't quite understand the setup at the beginning, because they were so used to only working on tarmac setups. So it took a little while to kind of figure out that setup. But once we got it figured out, we've been able to use it quite well over the years with all these videos, and be able to get it to do predictably what I want it to do.
So that begs two questions. Are you moving the car around based on the chassis, or using the diff and the handbrake, or some combination?
It's definitely a combination. The car setup's typically softer than you would normally see a tarmac car, so I can get it to slide just by braking very hard and getting the weight to transfer to the front, which lets the rear end oversteer quite easily. Also has to do with tire setup too, the type of tires that we run and then the pressures that you put on them depending on what we're doing.
So the race car guy in me asks, when you ran the banking in France versus San Francisco, change the setup on the car?
A little bit. We ran a little bit stiffer on the bank, because we wanted to be able to stick actually on the bank. But once we started to slide on there, we also kept a little stiff. Mainly because I didn't know if the car would roll down the bank if I caught the wrong angle. That was actually a really big fear. The bank that you see, the big slide on the bank at the end of Gymkhana 3, was the last thing that we shot, because I did not know coming back down sideways if it would roll.
Well, my disclaimer is I don't know this stuff enough, but I watched the jump turn in San Francisco, and I watched that banking, and I'm thinking, how do you know to move the car so you're not going to catch a tire and roll? What happened in all that?
Just gotta keep the throttle on the floor. That's all a part of it. I mean, especially like the drift jump. I didn't know how high the car would go or how far it would go. I had to work up to that one a little bit because I wanted the right shot, but I wanted it done in a safe way. So I started off in second gear in the beginning and did 4 or 5, and then I did 1 or 2 in third gear, and it just came out perfect. And it ended up being actually better on video than I thought it would actually end up being. So
do you debrief with telemetry? Do you pull telemetry from the car?
Not so much. This car is actually a little more basic than the older World Rally cars.
Yep.
The WRC has gone to a cheaper format to try and keep the cost down for everybody. The Focus that we used to race was $1 million car, and now the new World Rally car that we just started a year ago, the Fiesta, is about half that. So we lost some of that electronics in there that gave us some of that stuff. And the actual telemetry, that the impacts and angles and all that stuff, in the WRC car actually comes from a separate, it's not actually in the car from the manufacturer, from the team. It's actually from the WRC FIA side. So, but that has some interesting figures in it too, though. Like when I crashed in Portugal a little over a year ago, the final hit was 4.5 Gs. So that's sometimes some fun information here too.
Yeah. Things you do or maybe don't want to know. Your next race is Finland, the rally, right?
Yeah. The past years, I've not been able to do Finland because the X Games is always on the same exact weekend as Finland. But they moved the X Games this year because of the Olympics. So now that opened up that weekend for me to be able to go race Finland. So I only have 3 races in the WRC this year. I've had Mexico and New Zealand, both of which I got 9th overall in. So now I'm going into Finland, to where it's one of the biggest, hardest rallies in the world. And so I'm going in with a lot of caution because it's my first time, but I'm really looking forward to it.
So I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I was sometimes a harsh critic of yours in the rallying because of the early crashes in some of the early stages. But honestly, educate me what I don't maybe understand about the intensity and the challenge of racing WRC. I mean, the cars are different. The amount of time to prepare. I know you did as far back maybe as 2007 some World Rally in Group N, right? But talk to me about that whole approach to be competitive in World Rally, and maybe to let me off the hook by saying, no, you got to go up 10/10, Leo. There's no half-ass here. So tell me about the challenge, how you've undertaken it.
Well, I think it's really hard for a lot of people to understand that the level that those guys drive at is quite high. And for someone like me, that's I'm sponsored by Ford, but I'm not the factory driver there.
Yeah.
The guys there in the factory cars have a slightly better car than the customers do, and they have a lot more time in the car. Yeah. So it's just unfortunate. It all depends on budget, how much time you can put yourself in the car, and then how much time you can even allow. And just for instance, this year too, you know, I've done 2 events, but I've done both of them with no testing because, as the rule states, the only testing...
I never thought you were a stupid guy. No testing, really?
Well, the only testing that is allowed by rules, you have to do in Europe. So I went to Mexico and to New Zealand, but to do practice and testing before those events, I'd have to fly to Europe first.
Okay.
And then fly down there. So it's one of those things, I wish it was an easier thing to get into and get going and do, but there's certain things that just are sort of against you unless you live in Europe and can really dedicate your entire life to doing it. So, and to be honest, I knew that going into the WRC would be quite difficult. There's really no way for like a lower level guy to get in there without a lot of experience. And I actually kind of fast tracked myself. I'd only been racing for 5 years before I did that. And our championship here in the States is not on the same level as a lot of other national championships for rally in the world. So guys coming out of Finland and France and England and Ireland, they are up against much stiffer competition and actually further develop their skills than we do here in America. But the thing was, I had the opportunity, and I knew that without doing that, I couldn't push myself to another level. And so going out and experiencing that and knowing what I had to learn and the steps that I needed to get there was just my next step. It's what I had to do.
So not to put you on the spot, what have you taken away? How has it elevated your skills pace, consistency, just the ability to do something else?
All that. You know, it's one thing to get into the car and learn the car setup and be able to drive it. And
Yeah.
I got into the Focus, was actually very comfortable, and now the Fiesta, very comfortable. But the biggest, hardest thing for me is really learning to write the pace notes for these events. You know, and that is something that just takes years and years of experience. And I've gotten a lot better in it over the years, and I continue to learn. But, you know, these other guys that have done, you know, hundreds more events than I have. Even Matthew Wilson, who's, you know, average 5th to 8th place driver, he was racing a World Rally car before I even started racing. You know, so my level of experience compared to these guys is just very small.
So talk to me a little bit about what's the plan moving forward? 3 WRC this year and a schedule of combined. What is the plan for Monster World Rally going forward?
I think it's going to be a combination, again, going in the future. I love stage rally.
Yeah.
You know, I will always be doing that in some form or another. I'd like to go back and race in our U.S. Championship again full time. I'd like to continue racing as much WRC as I possibly can. It's very hard to commit to the budget and everything of a full year if I'm not going to move to Europe, and very hard for me to pick up my whole family and move over there at this point.
So not to become your advisor, but which is the all tarmac WRC rally in, I think it's Germany or something?
Well, Germany, Spain, France are the 3 main ones at this point. I've done all 3 of those. I've done okay in them.
Okay.
Definitely tarmac. Is a very specialized skill,
okay.
And because we have so little of it here in America, I'm good at sliding a car on tarmac.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But that doesn't mean speed. That's,
okay.
You know, so I would like to get more experience to do it. I've, you know, finished in the top 10, and I've actually had some top 5 stage times on tarmac, but it's really difficult. It's one of those things that takes a lot of commitment and having your notes absolutely perfect.
Let's not take anything away from the marketing, but talk about the motorsport, but talk about the marketing. Because I've been in some corporate meetings, and what is it, in your opinion, from everything you've accomplished with motorsport marketing and getting the attention and exposure, what is it that brands are missing when they think about how to go undertake motorsport marketing?
Yeah, I can't tell you what's wrong with them. I can tell you potentially why I'm successful.
Yeah, I don't want you to slam anyone. Just what is...
I think we've just found a good way to give the fans what they're looking for in an authentic way. And I always try and make things look and feel as real as possible. And even with the Gymkhana stuff, we try and shoot everything as the best that we can to show that we're not hiding anything.
Yeah.
That we give the best angles to where you really see the car come as close as possible and don't cheat anything in any way, shape, or form. So I think to me, a lot of it's just the authenticity that we're a real race team doing the best that we can and presenting things to the fan in the best way clearly as possible.
Is there a disconnect or a relevance between racing as show and racing as sport?
That's a weird question. I've never been asked that one.
And I guess
what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm throwing a prop at you because you've taken that up-close authenticity and you've made it entertaining to watch. Right. Where I've always heard race fans from time to time say, yeah, it was a race, but it was boring as hell. You've brought an element into it, but people have slammed motorsport for becoming too much of a show. You know, DRS and F1 and...
Right. Well, I mean, the thing about the skills and things that I do with the Gymkhana videos, there's a lot of drivers in the world that race rally cars that can do that stuff. Yeah. But when you watch the WRC, you're watching a race, and they're showcasing the story of, you know, Sebastian won this stage by 3 seconds, here's some action shots. They're showcasing the story of who's going to win as opposed to the driving skill. And that's what, with like the Gymkhana videos, we've taken it the opposite direction. Let's focus on just the driving and showcase that with the right angles and the in-car and everything to zone in just on that driving skill and present that.
I'm laughing because you set up my last question freaking perfectly. So when the kids come up to you, do they want to be Gymkhana racers or race car drivers?
I would say most of the time I would get the impression that they want to be race car drivers. I think most people have seen the Gymkhana videos because that's the most exposed. But, you know, and I get the question all the time, how do I get started? And I always tell kids, go to a rally school. That's where you learn loose surface driving and learn how to control a car and a slide and what to do with these things and actually can take a step towards racing.
Yeah.
So that car control and that experience is everything. And it kind of cracks me up even with like that CNN thing. They label me as a stunt driver. And I'm like, I'm not a stunt driver. I don't get paid to go do stunts for people. I'm a rally driver that actually does some fun things on the side and enjoys and truly enjoys to do it.
Yeah, sold that. I'm going to go light myself on fire, then come back for the interview. Listen, thank you very, very much. And by the way, I think you accomplished the motorsport marketing thing. If the kids are coming up to learn to want to be race car drivers from your videos, you've sold racing. Thank you. Cool. Thanks, guys.